Programmatic relies heavily on the algorithms to pick and choose, where your ads are being shown. So that's like a big piece as well as we go into the future.
If I ever have a concussion and forget who I am or what I am, I start looking at Google search history.
Your marketing team as a profit center, because once you think about like profit driven marketing, that changes the story. It's like programmatic is a great, it's a great piece for like your marketing tool, right? But it is not cheap.
Today on Marketing Over Chai, I'm excited to have a close friend, Wayne Rodrigues. Wayne is an expert in search and programmatic advertising. He has worked with Google, where he managed campaigns for top tier clients like Yum Brands, Volvo, and Adidas. Welcome, Wayne. I'm happy to have you on the show today.
So first thing first, Wayne, tell us what programmatic advertising is and what your career journey and your
Yeah.
background is.
Yeah. So I'll start with like my career so far on that journey. So I, grew up in India. I worked there for a bit. I was doing some sort of marketing in India, but it was more like TV and broadcast based. So I was working as a on-air promo person, but also like working on their marketing materials and being more creative, really, because I have a background in creative, filmmaking, production, all of that. And so I worked for a bunch of TV networks over there. And then I moved here to do my 2 year business program. This was back in like 2015. And so after I finished that program, the first job I got was in digital advertising. And, through a bunch of friends, I reached out to a couple of agencies and I started working at
Mhm.
Dentsu, which is, my first job. And my role over there was a digital media planner. And so I was working with very performance driven accounts, working on with their digital media budget. So planning across like programmatic, search, social, all of that. And that's when that was my first like intro to programmatic advertising. I had no idea what it was before I started the role. So it was more like learning on the job. And Dentsu had their own, trading team internally. And I'll tell you what that means in a bit. But they had a team that I was working with, to understand what we were buying, where we were buying the media for my accounts. And that was my first, foray into programmatic advertising. Taking a step back and telling you what programmatic really is,
Mhm.
in a in a nutshell, programmatic is more an automated buying process of media, right? So you have advertisers who want to have the campaigns run across like the web, social, search, all of that. Programmatic is one format or one medium of advertising where it's an automated
Uh-huh.
process. So, for example, 20 years ago, if you wanted to buy an ad on, say, yahoo.com, you would have to call up a Yahoo like sales rep and say, hey, I want to buy
Yeah.
an ad over here. And they would tell you what it
Uh-huh.
is. You would file an
Mm-hmm.
insertion order, typical like advertising, traditional advertising, and your ad would run over there. But when it comes to programmatic, it's a change in how you run your campaigns because right now it's more scale, there's more efficiency in that, it's more cost effective. And I think the biggest thing is it's more personalized. So, for example, 20 years ago, if you and me went on yahoo.com,
Yeah.
we see the same ad, like, we've seen an ad for probably a shaving cream or something, right? And that's not relevant to you, but it's relevant to me. But what happens
Absolutely.
now is that with programmatic, with all the data we have at the back end, we can
Mm-hmm.
get more personalized with targeting. And so you will see a different ad that's more relevant to
Mm-hmm.
you, and I will see an ad that's more relevant to me. And that really is a better user experience for, the end consumer, which is why
Mm-hmm.
programmatic is so important. And that's what, essentially, in a nutshell, that's what it is. There's a lot of data on the back end that goes into a lot of targeting involved as well, and that really helps like build out the best campaigns for advertisers.
Yeah, that explains it really well and puts everything in perspective. And I think it's great because there used to be times when you get a lot of ads, and I would get a lot of ads for things that don't really matter to me and things that I wasn't really interested in. But now I do get like more things that I want to buy, which I'm not sure is a good thing or a bad thing, but it's definitely more personalized. For the most part, it's definitely a very good experience because you're actually seeing the things that would bring value to your life. But there are, always those things on the edge which may or may not add value depending on how you think. So lately, like I've been getting a lot of ads for like freezing my eggs, which is not something I typically want to do, but yeah, it kind of gets a bit out there. So
Yeah, I think to that point, I think there's a reason why is because of your data, right? Like people, I mean, you're at an age right now where you're in your I don't want to date you, but like you're for a certain age, right? Like, and while you may not be the target audience for that particular product, it's because you fall in that, and again you remember it, right? That's the whole point. Like they want you to remember that coming up. So in a way, you could argue that ad did work.
it did work, and I think like even it puts that option on the table, right? Like I may feel very strongly against it, but or I may feel uncomfortable receiving it, but it at least puts that idea out there. So it
For me, the way I approach like talking to my clients, and like I've done a bunch of these campaigns for a long time. I think the first thing that most advertisers have to decide on and figure out what they want to do is understand what their business goal is, right? And I think being a media planner, being a client as well, and also being like working in sales, I think the biggest learning that I've taken away from all of this is like how do I hone in on what the client wants, and how do you build a strategy around that? I think that's like the key, point. Most advertisers will only give you their digital marketing goal and say, okay, we want to drive like a effective CPA, or this is our ROAS. But I think taking a step back and say, okay, what can we do for the overall business? How do we impact that? That will help you also think about how you run a campaign. And then once you have that, like you know, goal set, then you can think about, okay, how do I now build the strategy out? If the goal is to drive more consumers, or a more effective CPA, what do I need to do that? And then you start ticking the boxes and say, okay, now we go lower funnel and we only target people who are already aware with, interacting with your brand. Or you say, hey, we don't have enough of a pool to retarget over there. We need to drive more audiences down the funnel. So you go in with, OLV, or which is online video, or you go with YouTube or whatever that is. And so you build that out over there. So I think to build an effective campaign, you need to first understand your client's metrics or your own metrics, what matters to you, and then what could that CPA do for you? Because I think, for example, like if I'm a business, I say, okay, I want to drive like a $10 CPA. I need to be more flexible with that CPA, because $10 may not give me what I want to achieve, right? So I would have to be adjustable to say, okay, maybe I want to pay $12 or $15, and be comfortable paying more to drive more volume. So I think that's also important to have. And once you have that set, like business goal, or KPI, then you can go out and build a campaign.
okay, and just for the listeners who aren't very familiar with what a CPA is and when you want to like throw some light on that.
Yeah, so CPA is essentially a cost per acquisition. So most performance driven campaigns like credit cards or banks, they are willing to pay like a certain dollar amount to acquire a new customer, and so that's what a CPA really is. And mostly in programmatic, like those are the KPIs you look at, like so either the CPA or your return on ad spend. So if I spend $10 and I get $40 back, that's a 4-to-1 ratio, right? So that's what I would consider a good ROAS, which is return on ad spend.
And can you like walk us through some of your more successful ones? Because you've had some great experience with some really big brands, and some of them have done like campaigns that everyone knows about.
Yeah, so I think when you think about like programmatic advertising, there's like a couple of components that work there, right? One is the DSP itself. So the DSP is a demand side platform. Think of that as where you would actually go in and set up your campaigns. So you have, Google's DV360, which is a DSP. You have the Trade Desk, which is another DSP. You have Amazon DSP as well. And these are like DSPs built out by these companies that they license out to, agencies or advertisers, and say this is where you go in and you set up your campaigns. Then on the other side is the SSP, which is the supply side platform. So you have a bunch of companies that most, like for example, like a lot of these magazines and websites, they have ad space, but they all can't be selling the ad space to every advertiser. So what they do is they approach an SSP and say, hey, here's our inventory. We're pushing it through to you, and you take it and you sell it to any of the advertisers over there. So the SSPs really push their supply to the ad exchange, which is like the middle. So you have Google Ad Exchange, you have OpenX, you have Rubicon, all of these like different ad exchanges. And that's where the supply meets the demand, right? So that's where you would go, your auctions really take place, depending on your parameters, your budgets, your targeting, all of that. Yeah, so I mean, I've done a bunch of them for like auto clients, CPG clients as well, like Mars, and then I think like I can't go like into all the details of it, because of like compliance and everything. But I think a good programmatic campaign is a full funnel campaign where you have control over the whole funnel, so you know like who you're targeting, so and that's like planning a good upper funnel investment with like online video and YouTube and connected TV. So you're building that audience funnel over there. And then as audiences engage with your brand, you push them through the funnel and then you target them with like, whatever your performance driven KPIs are. So for example, if it's an auto client, you would show them a lot of like ads across YouTube or OLV or wherever else. And then once they are more familiar with that brand story, that's when you would like, they will see an ad for like, okay, I have to, now go book a test drive or go to a dealership, and that's more of a lower funnel tactic and KPI over there. So I've done a bunch of these campaigns. I think for me, the ones that I remember the most are like probably Jaguar, Volvo as well, and then yeah, a bunch for like Adidas as well. Like but they're just driving. They have sales around like back to school or around Black Friday. So there's a bunch over there.
Anything that like stands out with working on these that maybe something in the creative or maybe something in like working with the team in general.
Yeah, yeah, I think like one of the learnings that I've had, this was back like in, I think it was like around pre-COVID, where I was working with an agency, or a Group M, and one of my clients was a non-profit blood bank, and they were looking for blood donations, and this was a standard ask. People know what blood donations were, but they had another campaign for stem cell donations, and they had like they had like a fixed CPA over there, which was like we want to hit the CPA, and we ran the campaign for about 6 7 months, and we were not seeing any like reduction in our CPA. It was still really high, and the client was very upset. And it was like kind of frustrating because we couldn't figure out like why this was not working. And so the team, me included, went back to the data and we were like, okay, let's dive into the data and figure out like what's happening. And we realized that, while blood donation is a simple ask, people know what it is. People aren't really aware of what stem cell donation really is. They think it's, even I was like working campaign, I was like, I don't know how that works. And so I think there was an education piece missing over there. So our key learnings were like, okay, going back to the client and saying, hey, we need to drive, like, we need to maybe figure out a better way of telling the story. So not really going with the ask, but like telling them what it is about. So consumers need to know what stem cell donation really is. So that includes a lot of like YouTube or upper funnel awareness creatives, and have that going for about a couple of months to just like drive the brand story over there. And the client was like, yeah, we'll test it out, we'll see how it goes. And we ended up doing that for about 2 months, and immediately after that, we saw like a steady reduction in our cost per acquisition for the actual KPI, right? The low funnel KPI, because that changed the narrative. Then people knew that it was a simple ask. It was like adjacent to like a blood cell donation, so that became an easier task for us. And that became like a case study internally to say, okay, we need to have like always have a bigger story towards your lower funnel campaigns, right? It just can't be like the ask over there. If people don't know the ask, they need to have an education piece over there. So that was like one of my biggest like learnings when I was working at. If people don't know the ask, they need to have an education piece over there. So that was like one of my biggest like learnings when I was working at.
Mm. And that's like typical textbook marketing, right? Like awareness is like driving awareness is like one of the core functions of what we do. And there's like so many learnings from that, that story that you just shared. And one of that is like just being as a marketer when you work with, a specialist in like a field like this, being very open about the data and being very open about what your branding strategy is and campaign is, and being very open with like you giving them a lot of information, because sometimes what happens is like because most of the marketing teams are like overburdened, you end up just sharing a piece which you think is all the information they need. But honestly, the work that they do is as important and as big a piece of marketing, even though it's very niche, as what the rest of the marketing is. So really giving them a view on what your larger strategy is and where things are going in the next couple of months, what's the story, what you're drawing from, where you're coming, it really makes a big difference, because the more information they have, the better they can align to your work at the end of the day. And yeah, so information and like even being open and setting a feedback process where how the experts like them can come back and really tell you what the data is saying, because it's not a one way communication. It's not just about the message we are trying to reach, but it's really understanding your audience at the end of the day, and that's a key piece that I think not enough credit is given to people in this space, in the SEO and programmatic advertising space. They do interpret the story and they do interpret your audience as well. And
Right. Yeah, to your point, I think taking a step back from there, even because this is what I've had, like working with a bunch of different like C-suites for multiple brands, that I worked with. They often see marketing and digital marketing as a cost center. So when the time gets tough and budgets have to be cut, they look at marketing first. But I think you need to see marketing, your marketing team, as a profit center, because once you think about like profit-driven marketing, that changes the story, not just for the companies you're working with, but also for your own brand, because marketing is a core pillar of like your product, right? You have to have that. You won't succeed without marketing, and I think advertisers sort of like don't understand that. I think like the CFO needs to understand that first, and then the CMO, it's his job to like tell the CFO, CEO, like, hey, this is why it's important, and then that will help push the narrative for saying, okay, we need to invest more in these channels over here. What happens also right now that I've seen with most like brands is that, to your point, like they give you very limited information. They'll be like, okay, this is what you work with, and that's it. And then everyone works in silo. It's like search is doing their own thing, social is doing their own thing, programmatic is doing their own thing, broadcast is doing their own thing. And I think that's not how, like, consumers are not working that way. They're not on media that way, right? Consumers are like, they're everywhere. They are across like TV, they are across Facebook, Instagram, they're across, Google, YouTube, all of that. So you need to change the way you build out your marketing strategy. It is easier said than done, because I know like most agencies, they are overburdened, they have their limited resources over there. And that's why it's important for them to like have good partnerships with like who you're working with. So I think that's like a big piece of like who do you partner with, whether it's programmatic, whether it's search, whether it's connected TV, any of that. You need to figure out who your partners are and trust them to have your best interest.
Mhm. Absolutely, and like I think like just making a lot of the strategy, sometimes they keep it confidential because it's exactly that they don't know if they're going to be working with that same partner for a long time. So the key here would just be like invest in those relationships. If you're working with these people, they've got your back, trust them, and like there's more to achieve from that. Then yeah. So, moving into like the tech and tools that you actually use when you're in that space, because a lot of it is automated. AI has been growing, and we're seeing more of that come into place. I think the kind of interpretation of the amounts of data that you have is probably going to get better and better quality. So,
Yeah, so I think when you think about like programmatic advertising, there's like a couple of components that work there, right? One is the DSP itself. So the DSP is a demand side platform. Think of that as where you would actually go in and set up your campaigns. So you have, Google's TV 360, which is a DSP. You have the Trade Desk, which is another DSP. You have Amazon DSP as well. And these are like DSPs built out by these companies that they license out to, agencies or advertisers and say, this is where you go in and you set up your campaigns. Then on the other side is the SSP, which is the supply side platform. So you have a bunch of companies that most, like for example, like a lot of these magazines and websites, they have ad space, but they all can't be selling the ad space to every advertiser. So what they do is they approach an SSP and say, hey, here's our inventory. we're pushing it through to you, and you take it and you sell it to any of the advertisers over there. So the SSPs really push their supply to the ad exchange, which is like the middle. So you have Google Ad Exchange, you have OpenX, you have Rubicon, all of these like different ad exchanges. And that's where the supply meets the demand, right? So that's where you would go, your auctions really take place, depending on your parameters, your budgets, your targeting, all of that. So the DSP is more like what you would use to set up your campaigns. And the SSP is the supply side platforms that push in the data, and then the matches happen within the ad exchange over there. So that's like the very big core basics of like programmatic. And above that, there's also other data providers. So you'd have like Lotame, Bluekai, all these different data providers that push in data. So demographic data, geographic data, any of those like other third-party data systems to the DSP that you can leverage then to say, okay, I want to target like my audience is female 18-25 who have an interest in fashion, coffee, whatever. Like just like I'm making random things up, but like that would be data sets where they would pull in and say, okay, these people index higher for these interests, and that's like your core of your core campaign building in the DSP.
Perfect. So a lot of what you do depends on like good quality data. So how do you ensure that you have that?
Yeah, so that's actually been a constant battle for most advertisers, right? Because as advertisers and consumers get smarter about what marketing really is, they they want to ensure that they're not there's no wastage of dollars of media dollars, and at the same time the campaigns are being effective in reaching an audience. So I think when it comes to picking a data provider, you need to be selective with who you're working with. There's a lot of companies out there who have good quality data. So like if you work with Google, for example, you know you're getting good data from them because they have a bunch of data over there. If you're working with the trade desk, for example, they have they don't have their own data, but they work with a lot of like really qualified, vetted, verified data providers that are pushing in good data to them. And there's also like other companies who have data, but you have to really vet it and see like what really is working for you. And most companies, like most agencies, they already have like their own verification tools. So, for example, GroupM has their own data that they mine, and they know that okay, this is quality data over here. Same with like Dentsu or other companies, they would already have that in place. So when an advertiser works with these agencies, half the work is already done over there because they know like who they're working with and who the providers are.
That's pretty insightful. So I have like this really sad joke because that's what I do and that's what I crack. And it's like if I ever have a concussion and forget who I am or what I am, I just have to look at my Google search history, and I'll probably find out more about myself than if I ask somebody. So
Yeah. I think that's like I read this thing like a long time ago that said the ads on your phone will say a lot about you, right? Which is so true because I think your phone and Google probably knows you better than your mom or dad or therapist or whoever because that's where you would probably go, you know. But that's also changing right now. I think like to your point about like the technology that's coming up in programmatic and what's being used. I think we're moving to an AI first future, and I think we're already halfway there, really, right? And so the way people are searching right now is also changing. There's early adopters who go away from Google search and are using other platforms like ChatGPT or Arc search or whatever. But AI is a big piece of the puzzle, and I think programmatic relies heavily on the algorithms to pick and choose, where your ads are being shown. So that's like a big piece as well as we go into the future, like figuring out how do you leverage AI effectively, and the companies who do that will be the ones who come out winning on the other.
absolutely. With that, like, so you've got a lot to work with. So, and you definitely get more targeted and more, more spot on results compared to other traditional advertising.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so I think that goes back to what your business goals are, right? So, for example, like the traditional methods of like advertising when I was like even when I was working a few years ago was like, okay, what is the CTR? What is the impression reach? What is the impression share of that? what is the CPC? And those are all like fine metrics to see like how your campaign is doing from a campaign standpoint. But like, how is it do from a business standpoint? Like, is it really, are you really seeing an increase in sales? Are you seeing an uptick in, consumer visits? I think those are like, more data driven metrics that you need to look at. So for me, when I look at campaigns and I talk to my clients, I'm like, okay, what are you trying to measure over here? If it's like more sales, are we seeing an uptick in revenue? And revenue doesn't really come in that time frame. It comes like over a year. So like someone may see an ad right now, but not make a purchase until like 2 months from now. So having a good, like, a large enough look back window is really important over there, because otherwise you're missing out on like, effective uh, data over there. So I think when it comes to like looking at what makes a campaign more effective, or what's like successful, I think defining that at the start is really important. And the other thing I want to mention about programmatic is that it's very good to make like real time optimization. So if you're using like a programmatic campaign, you can go in there every day, monitor your campaigns, and say, okay, you know what, we aren't driving the volume of clicks at this time of day. Let's take something right now. So you make an optimization over there, and that's where you rely on the AI to like really quickly go in and make a change for you, so you can see immediate results, right? So that's really important with.
It's very dynamic and very user friendly. Like yeah, especially when I used to sell print ads for like monthly magazines. If they made a decision they weren't happy with, they was kind of like stuck with it because there's not really much you can do, right? So this really gives you a lot of power.
Yeah. And, and I think that, and I think that, on the topic of AI, I think AI is actually being used right now in most like DSPs to build out creative for you as well, because we've got to a point with AI where it can do good creative for you. You input your, your copy, your what you want to, spit out, and the algorithm will build that out for you. If you approve that and say, okay, we want to run with this, it goes live. So it also saves time on like, building out creative and having refreshes, all of that. I'm not saying it can replace like human creativity, but it does help it like quick turnarounds. It's what you want to do over there.
So the way I see it, especially like for AI and branding and creativity and like writing and stuff, the stuff that I do, is I use it as an intern. So it's gonna give you results and it's gonna give you stuff quickly, but the quality is something that you have complete control over. So you have to make sure you're like giving it the right inputs at all times, and you have to be very careful. And you can't really blindly trust anything that AI spits out. You have to use that human filter to really know what it is all about, because there might be something that makes perfect sense to the algorithm, but to a human being, it just might be like, hey. So it's the level of an intern right now, but in the future, you never know.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I think, the way I see it is like good data in, good data out, right? So if you have good inputs, you're going to get quality output. If you don't know what you're doing and you just rely on the AI, good luck with that. You're not going to help. It's not going to work for you. So that's what. But then if it's risking your clients' dollars, that's where it's like, kind of like a problem. And I've faced that, in the past, where I have to be answerable for like certain mishaps that happened in there for whatever reason. It's like, why did this happen? We have no control, because for a long time, programmatic was a black box, right? Like you didn't know what was happening on the inside. It's like you would set the campaigns up, you had no idea what the auctions were doing, and you had no control over that. But I think as we move forward with the Trade Desk and Amazon and Google as well, they're being more transparent now in how they function. That's a key part of like moving forward as well.
Yeah, that's perfect, and that kind of gives us a good segue into my next question, which was, what are some of the challenges faced in programmatic advertising at the moment?
Yeah, I think so. At the moment, there's the one big piece was like the whole Google third-party cookie data debacle that happened, where Google were like, we're phasing out third-party data systems, all of that. Please go away. And then, they went back and say, oh, we're not doing it. We're going to build out like different versions of how we do it. I think like, having that data is really important. So having clean data or clean data rooms is a challenge. The other thing is obviously ad fraud, which is, everywhere. So it's important to partner with a good ad fraud verification partners, or IAS or Double Verify, whoever. Like you're just like working with partners who can measure fraud and report back on that in real time. That's really important. And I think another challenge right now for programmatic is it's still early, but like addressability, right? It's not there. It's not as like addressable as we want it to be. But that's obviously going to change as we move forward with AI. Time. That's really important. And I think another challenge right now for programmatic is it's still early, but like addressability, right? It's not there. It's not as like addressable as we want it to be. But that's obviously going to change as we move forward with AI.
Perfect. Yeah, that's definitely really helpful. Like I didn't know some of those points. What are the emerging trends you see in the next few years?
Yeah, I think like when you look at, I think AI is a big piece. AI is like not going away for a while. It's here to stay. Uh, but I think another piece that is like really emerging right now is connected TV. So a lot of people are moving away from traditional broadcast TV, and that broadcast TV for the longest time was the biggest medium for like advertising, right? So like they advertisers will have a big chunk of their money for broadcast, but as more people move away from traditional TV, like linear TV, and they move to Netflix or Crave or whatever other subscription they have. I think that's the future of advertising. So right now, I think even like companies like Apple are thinking of having an ad tier support, with the Apple TV. Netflix is doing it already. So that's like kind of the future over there. And when it comes to programmatic, like having that supply is really important because that's where consumers are. YouTube is one piece of it. Like they're obviously on YouTube, but then what else are they on? They're on Netflix, they're on Hulu, they're on Disney Plus, they're on Apple TV. That's really key over there, and I think that's going to be like a big game changer. And also, like having people have smart TVs, right? Like I have an LG, I see as an LG as well. So like that's like another space where the minute I go on, I'm seeing an ad for something over there, right? For a bank or something else. I think that's going to be the next phase of like programmatic going there. And the other one is digital out of home. So traditionally, out of home should be just like print ads everywhere, but now it's like billboards are more digital. So the more digital space you have, even like in Ubers, right? Ubers are going to have ads as well right now. So like that's like that's programmatic as well. So that's where I would see the industry really moving to.
Yeah, there's like airports. There's like so many places that you can actually have quality ads, and that would be useful also, especially in waiting rooms. I find like I would rather watch an ad than read a magazine or something, because all the magazines they have there are like really boring.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's the beauty of like programmatic, right? It's not just one medium. You can add like multiple formats to your campaign. You can add like video, display, out of home, connected TV. There's a bunch of different formats you can put into one campaign, and that's really helpful in like measuring in looking at okay, display is doing really well. Let's move budget to display rather than video, or this video is doing really well for us. We're hitting our goals over there. Let's move budget over there right now. So that's like really important to have as well.
Absolutely. Any advice to new professionals joining the space? What do they need to know?
I think like it's not hard. I think people who graduate who are coming in. I think networking is a big piece. I think talking to the right people is really important. And also always like learning, being keeping an eye on the trends happening is really important. So just like that's like my advice to people like who want to break into programmatic, understanding like what the formats are, the mediums are. That would be my advice.
And for any new business person who hasn't done this before and who would like to get into it or needs more information, like what do you think they should do?
Yeah, I think so. The one thing I should call out at the start is like programmatic is a great, it's a great piece for like your marketing tool, right? But it is not cheap. You need a significant budget for it. It's not expensive. Like you can still work with whatever budgets you have, but the whole point of programmatic is at scale. So you need to have enough budgets to drive that scale for your business. So if you think you're at a level where you say, okay, I have enough marketing budget to try this out, definitely do that. Like there's a lot of people, a lot of companies who will be happy to set up a DSP for you. You can pick a DSP if you're a business owner who sells on Amazon. It makes a lot of sense for you to just go and say, okay, I want to use Amazon DSP to run my campaigns. And Amazon has a bunch of data from their shopper data, all of that first party data over there to help you do that. Or if you have like another business, like you can start with search and then move to programmatic, but you need to have like an adequate budget because programmatic does demand that scale. Because it drives the scale, it demands a higher budget.
Yeah. And the magnitude and the kind of bang for buck that you get is also very different from any other, channel that you would look at. So it
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's more cost effective than Yeah, it is more cost effective than, for example, like broadcast TV for sure, right? But at the same time, it's as nice as having like a social campaign as well. So it's all about how you can control. I think the one big challenge when it comes to programmatic is just like understanding the DSP technology, like how to set campaigns over there. Because once you do that campaign setup in your DSPs, that's going to do the work for you. All you got to go is go in and change, monitor performance, monitor KPIs, optimization, all of that. But having that DSP knowledge is really important.
And that's why I think it's always for something like this, it's always best to have a professional in the field do it rather than set it up yourselves. I think a lot of marketing teams, fall into that trap where, I can do this because it seems very intuitive, but there's more to it than meets the eye, right? So especially for that initial setup, it's worth spending on a proper strategist to have a look at it, to set it up for you, and then you can always like consult with them at regular intervals to know if you're on the right track.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think that's really important to have. So if you have the budget, definitely pick up someone to do it for you because you most likely will fail if you don't know what you're doing in the platform.
That's so true. And yeah, it should be said. Any final thoughts, Wayne?
No, I mean, this is like I'm always happy to talk more about programmatic. There's a lot we talk about. It's just like complete. I can go on and on about that, but yeah, this is like the complete like basics of what I would tell people.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today, Wayne. I've learned a lot from this interaction, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed this as well. If you want to reach out to Wayne, and if you need some help with your SEO work or with your building your strategy, your SEO strategy, or just doing some programmatic or any LinkedIn's great. So I'll leave a link to his LinkedIn in the bio, and you can reach out to him there. Thank you so much, Wayne, for being my first recorded guest on Marketing Over Chai. I hope to do many more episodes, and I hope to have you back when I am a big podcaster.
I hope so as well. Yeah.